So in this video, I speak with Paul Sinclair. For those of you that aren't familiar with Paul's work, Paul is a really diligent and thorough UFO and unexplained investigator. He's written a number of books on the subject, Truth Proof, which are highly recommended by me and also Night People. But if you want to look into Paul's work, you can check him out on YouTube at Paul Sinclair Truth Proof. You can also check out his website, truthproof.uk. I'm not going to do an intro on this one, so we'll get straight into it. But if you've got any questions or comments, then as always, feel free to leave them below, and I will definitely do my best to get back to you. Enjoy. So, Paul Sinclair, thanks a lot for coming. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be speaking with you, Mike.
Likewise. Cool. So, to give people a bit of an introduction, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, Paul, and we've only had one conversation, but I found it a really interesting conversation, as I have done with all your podcasts, really. So, as you know, I've been into ufology and all this kind of stuff for a long time, and yeah, just found the stuff that you were saying was not only sensible, but also entirely reasonable. So, yeah, really, I thought it'd just be a really good opportunity to catch up, try and go through a few of the points that we discussed previously, and just have a sensible conversation, really, about what's going on in the world.
Great idea, because I think we've got to remain grounded. We realise that there is a reality to this subject and the stuff that we sort of immerse ourselves in, but at the same time, you can soon sort of fly away with fairies and get involved with all sorts of craziness, and that. Obviously, I've got my views, and some people won't agree with them and think I've gone a bit too far with it. But I like to think that I do look for the rational, as well as looking at the things, the possibility of all these other existences, should we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when I've listened to your podcast, clearly some of the things that you've seen are quite disturbing, I have to say. So I know you don't consider yourself to be brave, but I think you're certainly a braver man than I am. And there has to be something behind it.
Do you know, Mike, you're right. And I mean, just going onto those cliff tops and into these remote forests and woodlands, I never used to really think about it. And in light of some of the accounts, I mean, obviously it were an interest, but some of the people who've told me these things, I've got 100% faith that they've seen what they're claiming to have seen. So it just strengthens the argument that this, whatever it is, these components of the phenomena, they're out there. I don't know whether it takes certain weather conditions, certain times of the year, certain individuals that are going to connect, and that could be why other people, Mike, are walking remote forests and walking in woodland and never experiencing anything, and they put their hand up and say, well, I'm a skeptic, I don't believe in any of this. I've done this all my life. I've been this and that, and other people see things. I don't know what the answers are, but maybe the minds are a little bit too closed to receive this phenomena. They say if you look hard enough, it looks back at you, and and if you've got a bit of belief, then you may connect to it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that brings us on to actually the first really interesting point, which I think is firstly understanding the environment that we live in. So obviously the universe is a massive, huge, massively expansive place. So if we look at things like the Drake equation, and for those that aren't familiar with the Drake equation, that is basically an equation which looks at the amount of observable intelligent life forms that would be out there. And the numbers are staggering. So I think it's fair to say, look, the chance of us being alone in the universe is very slim. And for me, I think kind of the way that I looked at it is that obviously in what I do in cybersecurity, and obviously I'm a qualified electromechanical engineer, I build things and take things out of their intended use. So when I look at the universe and what it comprises of and the elements of that universe, etc., really the possibilities are endless. So when somebody says, oh, well, I've seen this or I've seen that, to me, it's kind of completely feasible. And I know we spoke about this briefly the other day, but really I just thought I'd get your views on what do you think about kind of the universe that we live in? What do you think about?
Well, what's out there when we look, and the multiverse, should we say, and the Drake equation, which you've probably got a lot more knowledge of than me, but I believe it's the potential civilizations or intelligences that are out there and the vast numbers, and it's got to be there. I mean, but if you look at it from my point of view, and I wrote Night People because of my own experiences. And I'm not bothered, Mike, if we don't touch on that today. If we do, we do. I've not brought it up to talk about. But what I'm saying is, it's already here. You get academics, men of science will say, like, the impossibilities of this, of another intelligence contacting us. It may be out there, but the distances involved are just far too great for it to ever contact us, or potentially contact us. Well, unless I'm lying, unless countless thousands of other people, millions in fact, are lying, it's already here. If you were a man of religion, and I'm not knocking anyone's religion, but if you're a man of God, whatever religion you choose, there's some people could look upon that as some kind of alien being. But he is alien to us, and that's not trying to be disrespectful to religion. But what I'm saying is, if you can believe that, why can't you believe that other people are getting touched by intelligences that are beyond our understanding?
Oh, 100%. And this is something that I have definitely strong views on. So as you know, look, from traveling the world and working in places like Iran, the Middle East extensively, I've met and worked with people from all religions. And one thing that they all have in common is the belief in a God. And this is the first question I ask to any of them. So, right, okay, if you believe in a God, so you believe in a creator, then God's not from Earth, is he? Or she. But God cannot be from this Earth, so therefore God is an extraterrestrial. So this is why, kind of, and as you know, like, the thing that I'm quite big on, and again, it worries me because we just don't have the terminology or the language for it. But for me, I'm a firm believer in the simulation theory, and the reason why I say that is because if somebody, an extraterrestrial, etc., and like I say, look, really what we're talking about here is a God, or what's perceived to be a God. If they did create the earth and the universe, so for example in the Bible, God created earth in the sixth day and the seventh day he rested, then we've been created somewhere. So again, when I look at kind of the environment and I look at what we're capable of now, so I think we've only scratched the surface of our physical ability, really, in terms of sciences and physics. And one of the things that you touched on is people saying that things are impossible. And I'm a firm believer that things are only impossible until they're no longer impossible anymore. And we prove that time and time again. Now, splitting the atom was impossible, and now we've split the atom. Space travel was impossible, and obviously now we've traveled to space. So things are only, like I say, impossible until they're not. And so when I look at kind of the idea of a creator, and I think, okay, well, where would a creator create us? Would they do it in a finite physical environment, or would they do it in something which we could expand forever? So if you look at what we can put into computers, for example, and again, I don't want to make it sound like I think we're living in a computer, because I don't. But we could be living in something which is hundreds of thousands of years more advanced than us, which is basically an environment that's just been made for us with the laws of things like physics and the rest of it. Then kind of to me, that brings me back to my experience in programming and what I work in, because if you want to make a website where a flying pig goes across your screen, you can do that programmatically. Yeah. So to me, I can't see that really there's anything that somebody with a sufficient understanding of our universe or environment couldn't do. I don't think there's anything they couldn't do, really. Whether that's make mixes of different animals. And also, let's not forget, again, I'm not kind of touching on religion, but when I was sort of 21, 22, and I thought, what's the oldest history book that we can look at? And actually, the Bible is definitely a really, really old book, whether you believe in it or not. And some of the things that talks about in that, you think, well, actually, it's talking about kind of us being a project. So with the giants and the Nephilim enslaving the humans, and then obviously God, however you perceive God to be, wipe them out through the Great Flood, which obviously saved a number of people with. And when I've spoken to people in the Middle East, and I say about Noah's Ark, I don't think many of them actually believe that there was a wooden boat kind of bobbing about. I think a lot of them believe it was a DNA bank with kind of a map of species, which was going to be the future of the Earth. And I just don't think that's too unfeasible. So I think when you kind of look at it like that opens your mind to thinking, well, actually, these things that we're talking about may be possible, because everything may be possible if you've got that money.
I think the only things that restrict us are probably as our own minds and the limitations that we put on them, Mike. I mean, we did touch on this other day, and talking about things in the Bible, and it's almost, well, it's not almost, we could interpret it as they are having some kind of, I'm loath to say, alien visitation. We talked about the burning bush, and was it Paul that saw the screen drop down, which sounded akin to a projector screen, and he saw, because he called it a sheet, didn't he? A sheet dropped down, and all manner of animals that he saw, of cloven feet, and these men we're believing ancient writings and not questioning it. So why are we questioning what, not me necessarily, what other people claim to have seen? We realise that there's charlatans out there. We realise some people will see a shooting star or a satellite that sort of flares up and then dies and they disappears, and they think they've seen an alien spaceship. But there are other people that are actually seeing things that are absolutely out of this world. That's what other word is it that we could use? And they're not believed. They just roll their eyes. Yet the same people who roll their eyes will stand in church on a Sunday or stand outside of the daughter when she's getting married, as though the Godhead is some kind of, I don't know, answer, or it's difficult. And what you've touched on something else earlier, the vocabulary. New words need inventing. We don't have the words to describe what we're seeing. I mean, that's something I've said a few times before myself, and it's obvious that you've seen this and you've noted it. And I mean, you're looking at it from an angle with the computers and the technology, which is something that's sort of way ahead of me. I mean, you can talk all day about that, but looking at the advancement and looking at the potential of other civilizations, and then comparing it to how we've advanced with technology is a good analogy. It's a good way of looking at it. I've never thought of. I suppose lots of people have, but I hadn't. I'm a bit more grounded, as you know, Mike. And it's sort of wondering about in remote places, enjoy interviewing people, enjoy talking to people about their experiences. But I suppose it's horses for courses, and what you're talking about is just as valid.
Yeah, and I think so. One of the things we touched on the other night was a conversation I had with Gary Kasparov, who played chess against Deep Blue, which is IBM's computer. And I think really what kind of made me realise, and in fact a few years ago, I was at a massive hacking conference that I go to, which is really cutting edge tech, and there's loads of weird and wacky stuff there, if I'm honest. So loads of stuff that's going on. And I picked up a phone, and it was called the random phone. So I picked up a phone, and on the end of it, there was a lady on the end, and she had kids in the background, and she answered the phone. She said, hello. I said, hello. I said, I'm at a conference, and it's just put me through to you. And she said, I've had this 3 or 4 times today. Like, what's going on, basically? And I had a conversation with her for a minute or so. And like I say, could hear children in the background, etc. And my friend was kind of looking at me, and he said, ask her what the worst injury she's ever had is. And this is after speaking for a while. And I said, what's the worst injury you've ever had? And she said, oh, no, I can't sustain an injury. I'm a computer. And I was completely fooled.
Do you know, it's good you should say that. I'm sorry for cutting across you there. But I wanted to immediately, because you said, it's a random phone. And she says, I've had this 3 or 4 times today. And I'm thinking, that's not random. So obviously, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I suppose that part of, did she say that straight away? That part would have thrown me. But obviously, whatever she were talking about and the voice, it didn't sound computer generated. Is that the word?
Nothing at all. Yeah, literally. No, it's nothing to me. So when you think about the processing that actually takes, so they're actually taking in what I'm saying, processing it and speaking back in real time. It's unbelievable. And in fact, I saw this on the Gadget Show the other day where they were taking voice sampling from Craig Charles, who presents it, and it was speaking back in his voice. So words that he'd never said, sentences that he'd never said. And it comes into kind of a different thing, which is a bit on a tangent, but about deep fakes and that kind of stuff. And for me, like, I think one of the things that I realised was that when you make these things, so firstly with Kasparov, it was about what is intelligence. And like I said to you before, he gave a really good talk called The Brain's Last Stand. And what I realised when I was a lot younger was when we interact with these computers, these things think or could think that they're having an experience. So although we're not at a point where we're making civilizations on a computer now, how far away are we? Because if we're tens of years, so if we're decades or centuries away, we're not all that far away, really, until we are at that point. And then what are they going to be thinking? Because, they could be having an experience like we are.
Do you think, Mike, I mean, this is a shot in the dark, but after speaking to an intelligent machine, should we say, it could actually predict your thoughts and beat you to what you were going to think or what you were going to suggest? Do you think, eventually they're going to outthink us, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. So for me,
What we are doing now in certain aspects.
if you've used Facebook, then you've been manipulated by a machine, and with artificial intelligence, well, with machine learning, really, it's a big thing about artificial intelligence. But anyway, so yeah, like, and I think a lot of people have had this where they've had something, they've thought of something, and then the next thing,
How the hell have you just thought you were going to? I was going to say what you're just saying. Then I'm sorry for cutting across again. I was just going to say, and you fill us in better after I've just said it. But am I going nuts because I've used social media and Facebook and thought of something? Let's say a powerful torch, and suddenly I'm seeing adverts for them, and I'm not imagining it, and it's sort of more than coincidence. And other people have said the same to me. I don't know what's happening there.
well, the truth is you're being manipulated by an algorithm. So if anybody's seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, obviously a lot of people that I know that I've kind of grown up with in the tech community have been to Harvard. So like I say, we all meet up in Vegas once a year, biggest hacking conference in the world. But when I first started going, it was much, much smaller. It was a much smaller community. So people that I knew then that were young and up and coming in tech now work for Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, all these huge companies. And a lot of them have done behavioral science at Harvard and all these kind of places. And the reality of it is you're being manipulated. So the amount of data that they ingest from you, they can tell what time you're going to get up in the morning because they've got an average. So if they see that you check your phone between 12 minutes past 7 and 16 minutes past 7, by 25 past 7, you're going to be getting a notification because they know that that's abnormal behavior for you. So then they can look at things that you've searched on the internet. Obviously, everything that you do is logged. And the level of prediction that they've got is unbelievably powerful. And sadly, if you use that kind of tech, you're a victim to it. And it's the thing, like, I was speaking to one of my friends about this, who really, really knows his stuff about machine learning. And he said, look, my worry is that none of us understand it. So, for example, tragically, there was a really, really bad case of this where young girls were searching, and mainly young girls, were searching things on suicide. And the next thing, an algorithm showing them loads of videos on suicide because it can't contextualize it in a human sense. Yeah. It's just showing you what it thinks you want to see. And it's really out on its own. So no human has had interaction with that, saying, yeah, that's a good idea. That's the computer thinking for itself because it doesn't have the empathy. It doesn't have that kind of stuff that we do.
How far away, Mike, do you think we are from the computer then having the empathy or the intelligence that's is it programmed into it or built into it?
Again, I know it sounds kind of mad, but I think we must already be there. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at Moore's law, so if you're familiar with Moore's law, it's that computing power doubles every couple of years. So this was a long, long time ago. They said that. So the way that we kind of measure intelligence generally is in IQ. So if we look at IQ, so say for example, a computer starts at an IQ of 5, then 2 years later it's 10, 2 years later it's 20, etc., and it doubles every 2 years. We've smashed Moore's law completely. So now computing power doubles far more quickly. And now with cloud computing and quantum computing and the rest of all this really powerful computing stuff, my point here is that if you've had a computer or got a computer, had a computer, which we would perceive to have an IQ of 10,000, that would then design a computer that's got an IQ of 20,000. That would design one that's got an IQ of 40,000. So that curve that's kind of a sim wave which has gone like this, all of a sudden goes bang like that until it's invented all things at all times. And this is what we were talking about before. If you look at what happened in World War II, where people used to push pucks around a table to kind of strategize in war. Now, if you turn even a computer on it from a long time ago and you say, right, well, here's all of our main sites. So here's all of Iran, Russia's, China's nuclear sites, etc. You work out our risk. By the time you'd lifted your finger, it would be able to work out your whole strategy and launch that strike. So I don't see that we can compete with computers already. So the point is, at what point do they get to a point of intelligence where they can then do everything instantly? Because even now, we're talking on something that's communicating at the speed of light. My computer's doing equations at the speed of light, so is yours. So, yeah, how can we compete with that? Really, that's the question, isn't it? So on that, I mean, that brings us on to the really interesting point of what would it take to build the environment we live in? And really, to my mind, and this isn't me that's come up with this. This is mainly a guy called Nick Bostrom who talks about this a lot and has done for many years. And this is kind of the first place I saw it. Was 3 things must have or will happen, and that is, one is that we wipe ourselves out before we can build the environment which we believe is what we're living in. So like Total Recall, where you get plugged in, you go on a journey, and that's it. That's your reality. So number one is that we wipe ourselves out. Number two is that we lose interest. What's the chance of that happening? I can't see.
That's not going to happen, is it?
No, that's it. So even with the way the world's going, it would be sensible to say, look, if the world gets wiped out, then let's build a bunker that we can stick a load of servers in, stick all of ourselves in that somehow. And let's not forget Elon Musk doing this with Neuralink now. So he's doing implants into the brain, which is going to be a game changer, isn't it, really? Yeah. So we lose interest. Or the third and final one is that we will get to a point of simulation. Now, I've used VR, and I've got VR, so I don't know, have you ever been on VR, Paul?
No.
Right, so I've been on...
You realise you're talking to a dinosaur here when it comes to tech.
Yeah. Well, this is the amazing thing. I've got it in like downstairs in my house now, and it's a headset that you put on, and it changes your whole experience. So, for all intents and purposes, you think you're being transported somewhere. And a few of my friends are really scared of heights, so I say to them, right, go on there, and then you teleport within the game, and before you know it, you're standing on top of a tower. And as they are, I push them off it. And their reaction is as if they'd been pushed off a roof. And the point is they're being tricked into thinking they're on a roof. So for that split second, you trick the mind, and that's it. They are absolutely bricking it. So
how often do you use it, Mike?
Well, it's the thing. I don't use it often, but
no.
But it is insanely powerful. And
can you just create any scenario you want?
Yeah, of course, a game maker could. Yeah, so again, like if you're, and to be honest, I'm not much of a gamer. It's probably why I don't use it that much. But you can do things like Google Earth. You can teleport around the world. So I actually say that I'm not sure now if I would bother going to see Christ the Redeemer, because I feel like I've been there. And not only that, but rather than just being to a viewpoint with hundreds of people, I've flown around it. I've seen it in detail on this VR. So I don't know if I'd go there now, if I'm honest. I kind of feel like I've done it.
Do you know, Mike? I mean, this is a breath of fresh air talking about different things, but just jump. When we're talking about the proof of things that have happened to people, abductees, Travis Walton, or anything, and it's one man's word, and we've got to believe the sincerity of what that person's saying. Myself, anyone who's making these claims, and I think I've said a few times, if they could create a machine that could project a person's thoughts onto a screen, we would have the proof. Either I would be lying. Do you know what I'm saying? If what I'm saying I saw in childhood, if we could somehow, the machine could look at our thoughts. And do you think anything like that would ever be created or could be created?
Yeah, again, 100%. I mean, look at what Elon Musk's doing with Neuralink. Like I said, that is unbelievable. That's an implant into your brain. And now we're seeing brain implants that are giving people hearing back, giving people sight back. And I still think we haven't got much of an understanding of it. So like I say, working with AI. So for example, with AI, artificial intelligence, there was a study done where a computerized doctor is around 90% accurate. So one of the things that we have to remember is that as humans, we're not actually very good. So we can only hear about 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So we don't hear a lot of what's going on around us. So for example, radio waves, you're surrounded by radio waves now. You can't see them or hear them or anything. No. You're breathing oxygen, you can't see it. So we're not actually very good. And if you look at what your eyes can see, you can only actually focus on something the size of a postage stamp. Other than that, it's all peripheral. So the way that technology can be implemented into us, I think 100%. And I know this has actually been looked into. So one of the things that I know has been looked into before is extracting people's last moments from them. So, for example, murder victims, seeing if you could tap into their brain and see what they saw in their last moments. And again, I don't think that is unfeasible, really, at all.
Right. It's incredible, though, isn't it? It really is. It's science fiction reality, isn't it? It brought into our reality.
Yeah.
What is science fiction anymore? Because I mean, you look at old movies, you look at old science fiction movies, and they absolutely look cardboard. And obviously, back in the day, people will have been looking at them, jaws dropped, thinking, "Wow."
Oh yeah.
So what we're going to be looking at in 20 years' time, assuming that we're still on this blue ball.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And I actually think the problem is us when it comes to this and our perception of it. So what I was going to say about the doctor is that we know that machines are between 70 and 90% efficient in first-time accurate diagnosis. So you have a problem, And the point I was going to make is that we are extremely limited by human performance. So as humans, we get sad, depressed, sleep deprived, all that kind of stuff. So if you've got a doctor and you go to a doctor with an extrememe rare medical condition, he has to remember all of the training that he's done 20 years ago, or she, obviously.
Yeah.
So it depends how efficient they are. You know, have they had some kind of issue? Are they thinking about what their wife's done or what happened last night, etc., and not totally focused on that? You don't have that with computers, and this is why, like with, as you know, I'm some qualified pilot. I know that a computer can fly a plane better than I can because it can take in so much, it can calculate so much more quickly, and then looks at all historical events and probability. And this is why I like to say, like AI doctors, computers that diagnose issues, it can take in blood samples, saliva samples, every sample you can give it, analyze it, and then say to you, right, based on what I know, which is vast, which is petabytes of data and computing power, I think it's this. Human doctors are around 25 to 30% efficient. Yet humans will still rather go and see a human doctor, even though they know that they're only about a third as efficient.
What do you think then in the years to come, or in the future, should we say then, the human doctor's role will be? Do you think he'll be eradicated and we'll just have people who administer medication, or machines will do operations, and we'll just have people who oversee machinery?
Well, they already do, don't they? So
Well,
again,
yeah.
when you look at surgery,
So do you think that will be ruled out then? Will there be no need for doctors? What will...
Again, I struggle to see that there will be. Because again, like now, if I was having an operation, if I'm honest, I would rather there was computer aided or machine aided, because you're never going to get as steady a hand as a machine. So and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that surgeons aren't 100% capable, and I've got nothing but respect for people that could do something I couldn't, if I'm honest. This is not something I could do. But again, when you look at tolerances and our ability as humans, we're not particularly efficient. And now we're seeing surgeons that are controlling computers, but how long, like you said, until they're taken out of it? Because, and my argument to people is that if you believe in part of what we're saying about technology, whether you think it's going to happen in 10 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years, I think everyone probably agrees that there isn't much we're not going to be able to do. I remember when I was 11 or 12, I stood with one of my friends at school and I said, mate, one day we'll just have a pane of glass that we'll be able to call each other on. Bear in mind, we're just about using mobile phones at this point. I said, we'll have a pane of glass, we'll be able to call each other on it, we'll be able to organise what we're doing, watch films in it, whatever. And he was like, nah, not when we're 20. And now we've got the iPad. And even now, like my mum just can't believe it. She's so thankful for FaceTime, obviously with coronavirus, that she can see her granddaughter. Mm-hmm. And she even says, like, when they used to have a phone and a TV that only had shows on it for a couple of hours a day, it's almost unbelievable where we've got to so quickly.
Well, no doubt, Mike, you'll tell me that we've already got it, but are we going to get computers that are going to show compassion towards the user, Is that what's lacking? Is it the compassion? Is it emotion that a computer will never grasp?
I think it's the perception of emotion, isn't it? So even now we've got people that want to marry computers, people that think they're in relationships with computers, and the rest of it. And yeah, again, I don't think we're that far away. So when you look at how AI is used at the moment, it's like so one of the really interesting things that I saw was about the real life Rain Man, interestingly, and they took him to a place. So I don't know if you know, Rain Man was based on a true story. His boy was based on a real guy. And they took him to the US Post Office. And they gave him... And he basically told this guy there that he'd remembered every zip code in the US. And this guy just didn't believe it and said, no way. So he said, okay, give me a road in the US, anywhere in the US. Think how many roads there must be in the US. And he'll tell him the zip code. So he gave him a road and he reeled off the zip code. And he was like, this is absolutely amazing. So then he gives him another road and he says the zip code and he said, that's wrong. And he said, no, it's not wrong. He said it was this zip code from 1968 to 1979. And then in 1979, it changed from this to this. And what I've given you is the original one. And they had to do a lot of research into it and found out he was actually completely right. Then they asked him if he understood what the postal service was or how to send a letter. Didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue about that at all. So it's the context of the data, isn't it? So
it's so strange, and that sort of gives us an insight, really, into the potential of the human brain. You know, like you said, the guy had got no concept of posting letters or using the mail, yet he'd got this information somehow. He'd got it collated in his mind, and to an absolutely, well, standard of that a computer would sort of dish out the zip codes.
Yeah.
So it's there, it's up there. It's just knowing how to tap into it, or how to connect all the dots and engage it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's it. So if you've got Alexa, or if you've got anything like that, and you say, Alexa, what is empathy? It will tell you what empathy is. It will tell you what love is. It will be able to tell you what it is. It doesn't mean that it's capable of loving you or being empathetic, but it understands it. So again, how far away are we until it can give you that perception? So if we watch things like Robots or Westworld or whatever, then it's a really, really interesting debate about this. And at what point do they stop becoming robots? So, for example, you know what I say, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, acts like a duck, then is it a duck? Well, it's very difficult to say it's not, isn't it? So if you've got a computer sitting next to you that I could have this conversation with, that you could have the conversation with, it's kind of, you get into really dangerous ground, don't you? So one of the things, it's quite a sensitive subject, but if you have a look at Westworld, and Westworld is basically where these people can go into an environment where they're in the Wild West and they think that there's a group of people that are people, but they can shoot them, can do whatever they want to them. And they're just robots, really. They're 3D printed robots, as we would understand it. So it's all for entertainment. So people that want to be a murderer, rather than murdering real humans, they go in there and for all intents and purposes, people will beg for their life. That's it, and they can kill them. So if you've got somebody which is on their knees begging for their life, it's very difficult to say that they're not or that you're not killing another human, isn't it? But then you kind of get into dangerous ground because we're talking about components and giving components some kind of protection. When if you built a robot, which is quite convincing now, and your mate shoved a sword through it, you wouldn't think, well, that's murder.
Are we somehow being conditioned and manipulated to make that okay? And then we'd extend it to the real world in some instances, do you know? And I'm not advocating any of that. Do you know, I've never even watched Westworld, but what I'm saying is I've watched sort of children of it years with computer games, and it's all killing and machine gunning and I don't know, you're growing up with that from a young age, and does it become ingrained to the point where you think it's normal when you see these games, which obviously it isn't, but the machine or the people who've put the information into the machine are making these young impressionable brains think that is normal.
Yeah. Well, everyone wants things more realistic, don't they? So I've got, even here, I'm quite into retro gaming. So I've got an Amiga Commodore, then I've got a Master System, which is like Sonic the Hedgehog, and then obviously we've moved up to the PlayStation, the Xbox Live, and some of this gameplay I look at, and I think this is, like I say, I've never really been into gaming, but I look at it and think this is extraordinarily difficult to tell the difference whether this is a film or a computer game. So we want more realism, and I think that the big debate really is, at what point do we switch from saying, right, okay, well, these are just machines, to the point of, if they are having some sort of experience, which kind of brings us on to the next bit, and they are aware. So, for example, with the Game of Life, an experiment was done on this, where if a computer was to ask to be left on and not switched off, does that mean it's conscious? Because the conscious mind, really, all we can say is that we're something which is having an experience of something. So when a computer gets to that point, it's kind of, at what point does it go from being okay to brutally murder them because they're just parts, to actually they've got rights? And I think that's the really difficult part of the debate, isn't it? Because then when it switches to that, and it's like they're part.
About honestly, and I don't say that sort of blasé. It's just, you've sort of got me thinking in another field here. Sort of, you know, it's interesting. But you're the computer guy. Bound to be.
And one of the things that you said, so for me, this is why I always kind of struggle with stuff, because you don't know exactly what to believe. So, for example, if you go back to 1993 when Jurassic Park came out, if you took that back in time, even 50 years, people would probably believe that you've got film with dinosaurs. It's just, it's as simple as that. So kind of at that point, it was all right, okay, well, now it's very difficult for us to believe what we're seeing. So again, if you've seen films like Batman or Superman, took that back in time, people would think that there is a Superman in the future.
Without a doubt, yeah, that's a brilliant analogy. Yeah,
it's really, really difficult for us, isn't it? So if there's an alien race that kind of is coming here, which again, look, I don't think is unfeasible. If you look, again, if we look at the Drake equation, you look at the fact that there could be hundreds of billions of more intelligent life forms that are 10, 20, 100, 1,000 years ahead of us. Is it unfeasible that they'd come here? No, of course it's not. Really, I don't think it is. But then what would they think of us? Would they kind of look at us in the way that we're looking at these computerized devices, where they're not quite us yet. They're not quite conscious, but maybe we shouldn't kill them all, or what?
And maybe they have no reasoning when it comes to, I don't know, getting a specimen, should we say, of the human race, and doing experiments, not even sending them back in some instances, and experiments like we would sort of do on a frog in a laboratory years and years ago, which probably wouldn't be allowed now, do you know? And it does kind of make you think, but it's already here. I mean, what do you think? What do you think to these amazing men of science, and that's what they are, who'll say, no, it's not possible. They couldn't possibly travel these vast distances to get here. It's almost as though they're stuck in a box, because the physics that they know say it's not possible. But like you've just said, if another race, another intelligence, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years in advance of us has evolved, and it's all, then how could we perceive the advances in technology, the advances that they would have sort of done or created?
Yeah. So again, I think that with that, part of me thinks it's a shame. So I think that the way that kind of science is looked at is that there is a number of elements on the periodic table. That's what we work with. That's the way that this works, for example. And one of the really interesting things is that hydrogen. It's quite a basic kind of element or gas or whatever. But now we can use it to power cars. So again, if you went back to when hydrogen was first looked at, so you got a hydrogen bomb, got hydrogen-powered vehicles, etc., people would have said, well, that's not possible. So to me, I kind of see it as we look at things in a basic amount of elements, but there could be 100,000 elements. We just haven't discovered them yet. There could be off-world elements that we haven't discovered, and what are they capable of? So one of the things that obviously I'm really interested in is Bob Lazar's story in Element 115, because he kind of said there's a super heavy element which deteriorate or degrades at a super high rate and lets off a huge amount of energy. And I think a lot of science agrees that energy is the key to everything. So even a lot of skeptical scientists would say that if you could harness energy in a form, so for example, harness the energy of a supernova, then you would probably be able to do whatever you wanted to in terms of travel. So you have these elements, and everyone's saying that it doesn't exist. And in fact, I remember hearing a story when I was in America of Bob Lazar, where he got stitched up, really, if I'm honest. He went onto a radio show, and the presenter said, oh, well, actually, Bob, we've got this person who's a nuclear physicist, and he wants to ask you some questions about this element that you're talking about, which doesn't exist and isn't ever going to exist. So this nuclear physicist asked him and said, okay, Bob, so what happens when this element's bombarded? And he came back with all these questions, and he was clearly a nuclear physicist and a scientist, no doubt about it. And now, sure enough, yeah, we've got it. Moscovium, upoptanium, which is what element 115 is. It was only discovered a few years ago, 30 years after Bob Lazar spoke about it. So all those people that have said can't happen, won't happen, we'll never see it in our lifetime, have been proved wrong.
What do you think the reasons were, Mike? Do you think the reasons for shutting Bob Lazar down were? Do you think it was just that they didn't believe it, or do you think it was from an higher authority? Let's get this guy in and let's stitch Bob Lazar up and close him down.
I think so. From a few years ago, so I used to be massive on Above Top Secret. When I was younger, Above Top Secret was a massive website back then, and I was on it all the time. Probably spent way too many hours on it, and was quite familiar with these stories. And I remember, like, you'd have conversations with people about stuff and that, and they just could not even just grasp it. It just was not even conceivable to them. It was, no, of course there's no little green men, and that's it. And that was kind of the end of it. And as time's gone on, I think these things have actually become more credible, and people are a lot more open to it. But the point I'm getting to here is, do people really want to know? So, you know, like the old saying, oh, you want the truth, you couldn't handle the truth. Well, I don't know if I disagree with it, if I'm honest, because even some of the things that you've said and that you've seen, it would terrify me. I'm not going to lie, it would scare the life out of me. And would I want to know? Would I want to know that there's these creatures kind of roaming around that can run at 50 miles an hour and aren't nice things? yeah, like I said, I don't know if I'd want to know. So
Give me-
part of me thinks, is that why the government's doing it? Part of me thinks, is there kind of something where, for example, if we could interfere with ants, which not many people try and do they? So my friends say to me, well, why don't aliens communicate with us? And I say, when was the last time you tried to have a conversation with an ant? You're just not bothered, are you? They're just
No.
insignificant to you. But if
And
they were intelligent,
that's what you're saying we are to them potentially.
yeah, potentially, yeah. So ants are them to us, and we're potentially that to them. So
Mm.
who knows? So yeah, part of me thinks, is it for the greater good? Part of me thinks, yeah, could we handle the truth? And part of me thinks maybe as a civilization we're not ready for it. Just like ants may not be ready to wear tuxedos or whatever we're going to try and put onto them. I don't know. And
Yeah.
and yeah, part of me does wonder if we'll ever know. Really.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I'm honest. I don't know. I've thought about it a lot, but what do you think about it? Why do you think things are potentially covered up? Or not being taken more seriously? So even the work that you do, why is there not professional investigators out? And I'm not saying you're not professional, but you know what I'm saying. The government.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and I don't know the answers. I really don't, because I mean, everything, a lot. I wouldn't say everything, but a lot of what I look into, as you know, is anecdotal evidence, and that gets disregarded because people are wanting some kind of physical proof. They're wanting to see something or touch something that we've talked about. If we're talking about the cryptids, they'd want a body. If we're looking for proof, we want to see a specimen, either captured or alive or dead, and it doesn't seem to be there. It doesn't. It's all why it's one step ahead of us. I don't know. The UFOs. Why is it that when you go armed with cameras, you hardly ever get anything that's really good? I mean, jump into December. I can't remember. Sorry, December the 14th, and a guy quite accidentally got an amazing photograph. I don't know whether you saw it on website, Mike, on Truth Proof website. And he went up there, an amateur photographer, to take 30-second exposure.
I did, yeah, I saw it, yeah.
And he's no interest whatsoever. This Brian Lancaster, and I really thank him for sending me the photograph. And absolutely zero interest in the unexplained. And as he's taking the photograph, person with him said, "What's that light?" And an orange light appeared, then another, and then we got three. He estimated 12 to 15 seconds they stayed in his frame, and he got the picture. That was just pure chance. Now, if we believe that there is an awareness, which I've written about in Truth Proof 1, the intermind connection, then would he have got that picture? Do I stand there like a clown on cliff tops with my camera and nothing happens? I've sort of repeated this one, the rock angler, and I'd asked him if he'd seen the orange lights as he's telling us about what he perceived as a spacecraft landing on the cliff tops. 10 minutes later, there's Bob Brown with me, and Mick Sigson was the guy, the rock angler, and two spears of light up in the sky above us, just off, not up in heavens. And I said, that's what we're on about. And we looked at them. I got my camera, they switched off. Am I being silly? Am I imagining it? Am I as stupid as these people who think when they see a satellite, it's some kind of spacecraft? I think this is slightly different. There's something happening. There's too many connections. I know that weren't your question, and why are we not taken as seriously? I really don't know. It might be part of the reason might be the lack of vocabulary, like we've talked about before, to describe these things. We've got sort of simplistic terms, a flying saucer. That's all we can come up with from 1940s, is it? We've not advanced in terminology for this stuff. I'm not saying that's going to make it more credible, but we seem to be lacking in everything. But the main ingredient is proof, actual tangible proof. But it doesn't stop people, all walks of life, stepping forward and claiming that they've seen these things. And we only need one to be telling truth. They can't all be liars. Well, I didn't really answer your question, did I?
No, but I have to say, look, it brings on to a really interesting point, which worries me, I have to say, about the way that we perceive this. So, when I used to live in West London, and I was really into Michael Faraday. So a lot of people think, the Faraday cage, and that's what he's famous for. He's not at all, really. He discovered modern day electric. So I don't know if you know much about the story of Faraday.
No, tell us.
So Michael Faraday had a lisp, and his teacher used to beat him. So his mum took him out of school and said, "You're not going to school to get beaten because you've got a speech impediment." So he couldn't read or write. So he became a bookbinder, and taught himself to read. So when he was binding books in the evening, he'd read and bind books. He taught himself to read. So he went to the Royal Institution and watched a talk by a guy called Humphrey Davy.
What year are we?
It's like the late 1800s, so
Right.
maybe mid 1800s, so long time ago. And he went to the Royal Institution, which was known worldwide for being pioneering on technology. And he saw a guy speak called Humphrey Davy, and he wrote notes on what they understood then to be the fluid of electricity. So I've actually got one of the original books, and it's something that's really special to me. And like I say, it's about the fluid of electricity, because that's how they described it. So he went to Humphrey Davy with this book that he'd bound, and it was the notes on the fluid of electricity. And Humphrey Davy had an accident where he'd partially lost his sight. So he basically gave Faraday a job. Thought he's probably a keen young chap, so I'll give him a job, cleaning his workshop. And Davy kind of always saw Faraday as a bit of an idiot, and that was it, and dismissed it. So one night when he left the Royal Institution, he said, "Oh, Faraday, see if you can work out how to generate electric overnight." So Faraday did. So he correlated electromagnetism to power generation by moving a magnet in and out of a coil. And there is a point to this. So he discovered modern day electric. And Humphrey Davy obviously wasn't very happy. His office cleaner, or his workshop cleaner, had now discovered electric, something he tried to do for many years. He wasn't happy about it, yeah. So Humphrey Davy, after Faraday had made all his stuff, bearing in mind that he could barely read or write, he couldn't grasp the mathematics of it. So Davy sent him off to try and make telescopic glass, to try and compete with people that were making telescopic glass in Europe. And he couldn't do it. So then what Faraday tried to do, so Faraday came back 6 or 7 years later after completely failing in telescopic glass. So what he then tried to do was basically measure the electromagnetic effect on light and to see if it could bend and twist light. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it for ages. And he tried, if you look at his notes, he tried every chemical, passing light through it and then energizing a magnet and seeing if it had any effects on it, and just could not do it. And he basically developed a system to see if he could bend light. And he just couldn't do it, could not do it, until he passed it through a piece of glass that he'd failed with on the telescopic glass theory. So he shone light, put light through it, and then energized it, and saw that it twisted and bent the light. And that's where he kind of came up with that theory. But the point is that after that, he went to a guy called James Clerk Maxwell, because he thought that and any kid now knows this, that if you have kind of a column and you electrify it and it becomes an electromagnet, it has a column of magnets or of magnetism around it. But because if you put iron filings on a flat piece of paper, it just makes it spread out on the paper. Faraday was convinced it was 2D, but Clerk Maxwell came out and said, no, it's actually 3D, it's three-dimensional, and did the the mathematical equations behind it. And that's obviously now what we understand as modern day electrics. But that was kind of a really long-winded way of saying it. Faraday didn't understand it. He didn't have the way of illustrating the theory of what he was talking about. And I think that's a lot of the issue now, is that some things we know happen, but we can't explain why.
We can't explain why. That is exactly it. That not just the words which we touched on, but the actual understanding. Probably if we had the understanding, the words would come easy, because we would create words for the new knowledge. But it's the actual bewilderment of what we're looking at, that because we're taught that it can't be. We're not thinking outside of the box. So when we do see these things, or when someone does see something absolutely incredible, they can't believe it. Most people just shut down anyway, don't they, and don't want to talk about it. It's probably such a mind bender that's part of the reason.
Yeah. Well, even like that picture that, like you say, that you referenced from the other day. For me, like as a pilot, so I jump in a Cessna 152 and it's shaking about everywhere, and you need a powerful engine to get you up into the air and whatever. And it's the same with a commercial passenger jet or whatever jet. So even if you see a fighter jet, if you've ever been to an air show, they sound like they're ripping the sky. The amount of power that they need to keep that object in the air. So they say that you need two things to fly: airspeed and money. Because if you put enough airspeed over a brick, it will fly. It will levitate. It will rise up. But you need a huge amount of power. So really, the reason why I'm saying this is because things don't just appear in the air. It takes a huge amount of energy to get them into the air, to levitate them, to keep them locked in a position, and the rest of it. So when we're seeing things and people think, oh, it's nothing. No, it definitely is something. Like I say, things don't just appear there for nothing. So that kind of makes me realise that when you see something, so like we said before, like, a lot of these UFO cases can be explained. People that say that UFOs are coming down and they're having affairs with aliens and the rest of it, you think, right, okay, part of that is quite difficult to believe or understand. I mean, who am I to say they're not, but it's quite difficult. When you get somebody like Captain Terauchi, who says that he was followed by a UFO and that it went around him, and there's radar evidence of it, you've got radio traffic going back and forth, so they're explaining what they're seeing. He's drawing diagrams, and clearly, again, radar doesn't bounce off nothing. So there's something there. So if there's something there, it's got some way of keeping it in the sky. So it's something, isn't it? Whatever way we look at it.
Is that the walnut-shaped object?
The walnut that was twice the size of an aircraft carrier. So again, what do you need to keep something the size of an aircraft? Well, twice the size of an aircraft carrier in the sky.
And why are we discounting a credible man like that? It's beyond me. It's absolutely, yet. Well, it happens, doesn't it? And time and time again, it seems like everybody, major UFO cases where they've got military personnel involved and high-ranking military officials, and they still don't get the voice or the platform that they needed. They will speak, but it's usually at a UFO conference, not dissing UFO conferences, guys. Spoke at them myself. But it's not the vast populace that they're preaching to, is it? It's all they're preaching to the believers, the converted. And I don't know. Why do you think that is? Are we being deliberately suppressed?
I think that anybody that's tasked with being kind of the military and protecting the country is never going to want to come out and say there is things that we do not understand and we can't counter. So there's a number of really credible stories. So there's one of a military boat which tried shooting at a UFO. I don't know if you've heard about this, but they were shooting at this UFO, and this UFO was shooting back at them, and it was damaging their boat. They were in a small boat, nothing massive. And when they looked at it, they'd been shot with their own bullets, and it's well documented. So whatever this was had the technology to bounce these bullets back. And again, that's not a conspiracy theory. That is like well documented evidence where people have given that evidence and put their name on it, which they know could be career-ending or could be life-changing for them. Yeah. And they're still prepared to. So it's like, again, things don't just reflect bullets. And the same with Captain Terauchi. Things don't just fly next to you without something. Same with the Iranian jet case. So again, Iranian pilot said that he went to engage with a UFO. He was sent out to investigate a UFO, went to engage in a UFO. His jet was completely shut down. He had to eject. So again, things don't just shut jets down. It's like these things are credible. So,
and do you think it's an intelligence that's shutting the jet? Obviously, it's an intelligence, but do you think it's a living intelligence or a mechanical intelligence that would be doing these things? Do you think it's living? We wouldn't say flesh and blood, but biological entity inside a mechanical machine, or do you think the machine's actually thinking? And probably too much of a question, really, because we don't know. But I've called the website "Intelligent Light Forms" because of the light that we saw or we see over the sea. There seems to be an awareness to it. But is there something within that light that's, it's
yeah. Look, so I think personally, and obviously again, I've thought about this a lot. When you look at David Fravor's case, for example, so David Fravor was the Nimitz case where they went off and saw the Tic Tac UFO. And if you have a look at a video of that, which a lot of people think David Fravor got, but he didn't. It was one of his colleagues that took that video. They were using FLIR, so they were using forward-looking infrared, but they could only see it on specific systems. And I think actually TV was the best way to see it. So the point I'm making here is that in these aircraft, and if you look at the way these aircraft work, so for example, I haven't seen this, but with the new jets, the rumour is, and obviously it's classified, so that's why nobody's really seen videos of it. But the rumour is that with the helmets cost 350 grand, and when you put them on, you can't see the plane, so you can see directly below you, so you can't actually see the aircraft. And the point is that they're building up an intelligence picture. So as an aircraft, and I've seen this happening. So I was in Mosul as it was liberated, and I thought I'd been to air shows until I'd been in a war zone. And when you see what's going on, it is incredible what these aircraft do. And actually, it really hits it home that these are killing machines and that they're serious weapons of war. But when that's 25 miles out, that's got object detection on it. So it's called YOLO, you only look once. And those cameras are so powerful, combining that with satellite data, they're saying, right, tank 1 is here, tank 3 is here, tank 5's there. there's our forward operating position, so our best target is X, and they're seeing all this from the air.
Yeah.
So when I look at things like the Iranian jet case, I think, is it unfeasible? So really, what we're saying is that something has got better technological sophistication than them. If
Yeah.
we went back to the Wright brothers, an aircraft from World War II, a Spitfire, would take them out. So
Yeah.
again, like if they've got something which has got visibility into our technology, they'd turn us off at the blink of an eye, wouldn't they? There would be
Well, yeah.
nothing. Nothing.
We've heard it, haven't we? Where they've said, soon as I locked on, this thing just sped away at speed, well, astronomical speed. Do you think that that's reading the aircraft's technology or reading the pilot's mind?
Well, it's the thing. It's interesting, isn't it? So again, like with mind reading, and ESP, and all that kind of stuff. Do I believe it? Yeah. In fact, I do. I have to say, I think there's a lot that we don't understand. I think that there's loads of stuff that we just can't comprehend in our brain, really.
Yeah.
And I think that combine an intelligent life. So look, one of the big debates, and look, obviously I can't really say much about this because I've never claimed to see an alien. Can't even say that aliens have been it, if I'm honest. How would I know? But I think the theory is that if we were going to send a ship out, for example, like Red Dwarf or whatever, that's going to go on for 1,000,000 years and maybe infinitely, we can't go, can we? Because we'll die. So we haven't got a lifespan. So what are we going to send out? We're going to send machines. And that may be machines that look like us, act like us, etc., and whatever. But so therefore, is it unfeasible to say that that's what's being sent here? Basically, robotic. Well, what we would, again, don't think we have the terminology for it, but synthespians, robotic beings, whatever you want to call them. So if that happens and they're coming with technology, they'd run rings around us, wouldn't they? And like I say, if you look at some of the Greek gods like Thor, Poseidon, who've got hammers and pitchforks and the rest of it, that to me sounds like technology. Sounds like weapons, doesn't it? So if we're 1,000 years ahead of where we are now, and then we went back to the time of Thor, would Thor be a relatively unsophisticated person with a weapon that we then understand and wouldn't be a god at all? It would just be a person with a weapon. You don't know, do you?
No.
So
where do you want to take this now, Mike?
oh yeah, so look, that's sort of fun. So yeah, really, what can we say? So coming back to the UFO thing, look, obviously you've had a lot of credible witness cases that have come to you. What do you think about it? How many do you think can be reasonably explained? How many do you think are inexplicable?
Well,
what do you think makes it credible?
I get what is the most incredible.
Well, what do you think makes something credible? So what do you think is easy to explain?
I think multiple witness accounts help. Especially if they're all, if the three witnesses at Hummunby. I don't know if you've heard me talk about that, which is about 11 miles from where I'm sat, 8 miles from where I'm sat now, on the industrial unit in 1998. And all three of them claim to have seen, well, they call it a classic-looking flying saucer. I've not put any words into their heads. These guys hadn't spoke to each other in a lot of years. I just happened to, one of the lads used to work with me, his son, and I found out about it and got talking to him. So I spoke to them all individually, and they all said the same thing. That becomes, to me, that's a credible case. But it's all the ancillary things around it that I can't get my head round. This perceived poltergeist activity. I don't know if you've heard me talk about Hummunby, Mike, but the build up to the actual source of what they saw in July, I think, June, July, August 1998. 3 months before, there's coins dropping out of the air in the warehouse. There's steel washers flying about, and all right, you the skeptical mind could say, yeah, but one of them might be just flinging them. You know what I mean? And there's got to be an explanation for this, but none of these guys could think of an explanation, and they're literally dropping in front of them. Huge footprints on the cars when they're going out to go home, because they worked nights at this industrial unit. They had day jobs, and then they used to go on a night. They were doing high quality sign writing and spray jobs on good quality motor vehicles and open top buses. So they'd work it sometimes on a weekend all through night. But when they'd come out in winter, there's footprints in the condensation on the car. Huge footprints. Don't tie in with the UFO that they saw ultimately leading to it, because it were 96, 7 and 8. It were over a 3-year period that all this build up in June, July and August in all three of them years. but it were almost like a paranormal soup of activity that were taking place that were just... Now, is that activity stirred up and excited in the wake of the bigger event, or is it all part of it? I don't know. I haven't got an answer to it, but I mean, it culminated in 1998 with them seeing what they... Well, Andrew... Let me get this right. Andrew saw an alien being inside the craft from the warehouse, said he could see this thing. Dave saw it stood outside, abnormally tall, and could see this thing. The other guy, whose name I'm not using, but he admits to seeing it. And you think to yourself, they've nothing. I mean, other two have given me the names. People can know who they are. The other one doesn't want to know, and that's fair. I've got to respect that. But they've nothing to gain by telling me a story like this. Now, to me, that's an accurate story. That is a good story. The XS894, the Lightning that crashed in September the 8th, 1970. There's been over the years, there's been a lot of sort of controversy about it, saying it was nothing to do with an alien or UFO related event. And I'm not in a position to put my hand up and say, well, it was, but I think there's a lot that points to it potentially being a UFO related event. Days and weeks before this aircraft crashed, there were a lot of unexplained activity in the area. Is that just coincidence? I think I haven't got the dates in front of me now, whoever's listening to this, but I think a number of days, and we're not talking weeks, days before it crashed, an RAF Marine launch based in Bridlington had a 12-inch by 25-foot hole tore in its hull when it hit a submerged obstacle out off the bay, out near Flamborough Head. The aircraft crashed, I think, 12 to 15 miles off Flamborough Head. So that was just days before. The military personnel on board at the craft said there were no obstacles, nothing in his way. We don't know what did it. Now, I've got the photographs. It were beached on North Beach. Days after it crashed, a speedboat a few miles up the coast. It's an unknown submerged obstacle or something it hit and disintegrated. And the occupants of the speedboat, a father and his children and a family friend, were all picked up by a cabin cruiser. And there's the local butcher from Flamborough, because we're all, in this close proximity, contacted me. Dean, they call him. I don't know how to say his surname, but Dean. Young boy at time when this crashed, or a young man, and they all went after school, early September, to look at what they were told were landing traces of a spaceship that had landed on the cliff tops at Flamborough Head. So he's gone on film, he's let me record him. It doesn't mean he's telling truth. It doesn't mean that anybody who tells me anything is telling truth. We know that the speedboat crashed. We know that the Marine launch suffered that horrific, I'm going to say injury then, guys, sorry, damage. But, but what's interesting is that I spoke to a former lighthouse keeper at Flamborough Head years before this, because he told me where they went to look at these alleged landing marks where this spaceship had landed, and he told me the same. And I knew the field, I know the exact place it landed, and we know the farmer, and I think it was Les Drake who does live streams with me. Les has spoke to farmer actually, or now the son, I think it is, and I'm maybe going to be able to get to speak to him, because we were told that men in suits, I'm not saying men in black, men in suits came and made him plough the field out in September to eradicate the traces of this thing landing. So I'd got it off the lighthouse keeper. This is early September. I'd got it off the former butcher, Dean. Well, it's Dean Bolton, but it's not. It don't matter because he wouldn't mind me saying it. I mean, because he said, "What have I got to lose?" So we went to look at landing traces of an alleged spaceship on the tops. Now, none of this makes that aircraft, that tragedy off Flamborough Head, any more UFO related than it were just a tragedy. But it just seems strange that we've got all these other events, and there's more. I mean, I didn't think I'd be talking about XS894, but there's more. If I sort of put my mind to it, there's a lot more and I've got more information on it. To be honest with you, it's just whether a former radar operator wants to talk to me and give me I need more information. When somebody's telling me something in an official capacity, I don't want them to put their pension online or their job on the line, but I need some technical details that make people realise that, yes, he spoke to this guy. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I'm waiting for at the moment.
But like you said about the warehouse story, like,
Mm.
do you find that surprising? Because personally, I don't find that surprising. So I think an interesting point actually is to talk about dimensions. So, for example, if we look at UFOs and the way that they act. So, for example, in the case of David Fravor, going from 90,000 feet to 50 feet instantly. So obviously, and the way they turn kind of 90 degrees at high speed. So they're generating inertia, or they would generate inertia. So I think what the general fear is that if this was to be possible, which I think, given the fact that airline pilots, military pilots, eyewitnesses, police officers have all seen this stuff happening, whatever it is, then clearly it has to be possible somewhere or another. Then that would not be able to be affected by gravity. Because if it was, then it would just smash everything up inside and it would be a major issue. So on that basis, you could say it's in a different dimension. So it's in a different dimension to us because it's not affected by gravity. So if that's the case, then, and we believe that there could be another dimension in that perspective, how many other dimensions are there? Because if there's 3,000 and you're talking about coins dropping from the sky, which could be acting in another one, then again, if there's 10,000 or a million dimensions, and these are just things that we haven't unlocked yet in terms of our theoretical kind of view on it, then yeah, again, is it surprising to me that these things might happen at the same time? It could be a knock-on effect. Like we know, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So,
well, do you think they're happening at the same time then, Mike? Because the conditions are right for the extra dimensions to integrate and to infiltrate or to work within our sphere of existence. Do you think so? They're not necessarily all connected to each other. It's just that conditions are favourable for these things to come through.
yeah, that's what I think personally. I think how could we know if they're not? So, for example, like if you've got a huge amount of power from a spacecraft or from some sort of craft. So, look, one thing we know is that if you're going to travel interstellar, then you need a huge amount of power. So that would undoubtedly have a knock-on effect. We see that with EMPs and the rest of it. That there's a lot of strange phenomena that's reported when this stuff happens, and even like ghosts. So this is what I find quite interesting about stuff like this is that a lot of the time we hear that ghosts walk through walls. That's one of the big things. But a lot of the time that's because a doorway's been in that wall at that point, for example. So I've heard multiple cases of that. So how do we know that it's not just leftover energy? And in fact, I was having this conversation with one of my friends. And he said, "Mate, it's totally feasible," because he had a guy that had some sort of illness, and he basically was in a strict routine. So he'd wake up every morning, and my mate said every single day at 8 o'clock, I can look out my window and he'll be there at his sink, undoubtedly. And he said at 2 minutes past 8, he'll walk off, at 5 minutes past 8, he'll come back, whatever the timings were. And the guy moved out. He didn't die, he just moved out. And my mate continued to see him for weeks after. He kept seeing him. And he was saying that to me just seems like either my perception of it because I'm in the routine of seeing it, or some sort of residual energy because it's been in the routine so much. Yeah. So yeah, I think potentially there is cross. And again, I'm not saying that I'm explaining this. I'm not saying that this is feasible, or whatever. I'm saying that we just don't know. And that's so. How can we say that wouldn't have a knock-on effect, or some sort of super powerful UFO wouldn't have an effect on metallic objects within a warehouse? We don't know.
Do you think that emotional states within us, you, me, my wife, family, do you think they can affect the way that the paranormal interacts with us? One example I can think of is my wife lost a mum a lot of years ago, and she's never been really that interested in this kind of thing, and she went into the front room and she was sorting clothes out for her dad, and her mum's clothes and things. And while she's in the room, and I believe Mary, I have no reason to have said this, she said I could hear this noise, like a humming sound. Sorry, I must sound stupid there, guys, but there you go. She could hear this noise. Yeah. She says, and I'm led to on cabinet where the display cabinet. So I'm led, and I reach up and I pick it up, and it's some red air horns that you have on a push bike, with the gas canister.
Yeah.
But there's no canister attached. It's just the plastic horn, and it's sounding in her hand, and she can feel it. And she took it in to her dad, and it stopped. Now she's always remembered that story. I mean, there's nothing that could have made that noise, and I'm wondering if it's an emotional state that we're in. Like, I mean, somebody passes away, or you're in an elated mood, and these things happen. Maybe the other side is tapping into that energy and connecting with us at a time when it wouldn't. Normally, everyday life and hustle and bustle of going to work and getting up, and we're just not focused on anything except staying alive, are we?
Yeah.
But
No, I completely agree. So look, there's some really interesting stories around this. So it's kind of perception, isn't it? And I definitely believe perception is reality. And even, well, I don't want to say conjuring because it sounds like Harry Potter, but for example, I remember I used to watch Strange But True. I'm sure you probably did as well many years ago with Michael Aspel. And I was probably way too young to be watching it, but there was a lot of stories on there, and some which were undoubtedly true. So, for example, I remember a kid. His dad was a farmer, and he'd been stuck under a piece of machinery. And this kid was only like 12 or 13. He went and lifted this piece of machinery off him. Superhuman strength.
yeah,
Like literally superhuman strength. So adrenaline and all that. And again, I don't think we use much of the human body, and I don't think we use much of our perception of it. And one of my friends said that he had a thing where he was living in a really rough part of town, and a guy used to live in his house that was imprisoned, and he'd been in prison for like a couple of years. But he woke up one morning, and he said he felt a massive thud in his house, and he thought, "What on earth's that?" And he said a guy tried to throw a brick through his window, but he hadn't hit the window; it hit the house. So he went downstairs, and as he did, a guy was pointing a shotgun at him, saying this other guy's name, and he was like, "Geez, like it's not him. It was complete mistaken identity." But he said that his first thought was that he had to get this guy away from his house. So that's quite an extreme story, but I know the guy, and it's undoubtedly true. And he said that he ran, and as he was running round trying to get this guy away from his house, he tripped over a curb and smashed his foot in and hit his head. And he said that he didn't think he was going to be able to get up, and he said that as he did, something just lifted him and said, "Get up." And he said he heard a voice saying, "Get up." And he was like, mate, he said, "I've never believed in anything." He said, "I've never believed in ghosts, never believed in the paranormal or anything." But he said, "Something picked me up, without a doubt." He said, "I don't know what it was." Extreme stress or emotion. Yeah, I think that definitely can unlock certain parts of it.
And I wonder if that sounds like a spiritual type element, if we want to perceive it as spiritual, that lifted him up. And, I got a... Well, I spoke to a lady. She's very ill, this lady, Annie the caller. I'm not saying her surname. And she sent me a lovely email at first and told me that she'd seen an angel. This is quite recent. I'm just... One sec, guys. Guys, there's only you here, Mike, isn't there? Anyway, I can't find it, but basically, she brought her son up. I think her husband... she divorced her husband, or he divorced her. I don't know which way, but her son's in his late 40s, early 50s now, and she brought him up from an early age. She says, and he won my life. She said, and he had a stroke. She said, real debilitating stroke, but for a time it was touch and go whether he actually lived, and he's in hospital. She says, I'm praying every night, and because he's my life, I've got nothing without him. She says, and at an early age he's had this stroke as well. I need to point that out as well. He's sort of not even a man, he's in between, he's in his teens, and he's had this stroke, and she's praying and praying. She says, and I woke up in the night, she says, and I looked into the corner of my room. She said, and where the dressing table is, and she sent me a drawing, she sketched it out. There's no wings, but she believes it had wings. She says there's this figure as tall as the ceiling, glowing, and I'm just looking at its back with huge shoulders. It's white or cream coloured. She said, I couldn't take my eyes off its hair. She said that it looked like a page boy hair. She said, and it didn't speak to me, but it was telling me in my mind, don't worry. Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. It will be fine. Everything will be... She says, it were even telling me without speaking that it couldn't turn round, because if it had turned round and I'd have seen it in its full form, it would have probably been too much for me. As in, it could have killed her. The actual I don't know, the actual presence of the being. She said, but I saw this. I mean, and this lady, I mean, she's getting on in years now. I've spoken to her, as I said. She said the next morning, contacted the hospital. He'd come out of his coma, and he's okay. Now, is this all just one big coincidence? Did she have some wonderful lucid dream? And I mean, we're always going to get people saying that kind of thing, but she swears she weren't dreaming. She swears she saw this, and that's another thing that we touch on, or people touch on. You know, would you talk about such fantastical things if they weren't true with something as sensitive as the most precious thing in your life, your child or a loved one? You know, that's something I don't think a lot of people would. You know.
Yeah, no, I don't. But look, and I think the main thing with that is like we just said, look, perception is reality. So whatever that is, whether it's sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or whatever that is, or of course an angel, as we perceive it, then that is something that she thinks has happened. 100%. 100%. So, and that's what I think is kind of really interesting about, so for example, like Woodbridge or RF Bentwaters, one of the most famous UFO cases in the world. And people say, yeah, well, they're faking it. I would put money on it that you are not going to get someone like Charles Holt, who's the CIO, so the commanding officer of what is a nuclear base at the time, and a bunch of airmen and military police officers to fake that. It's not going to happen, I don't think, at all. The chances of that are so slim. I think there's more chance of that being an alien race from somewhere a billion miles away than there is of them all corroborating that as a fake. I just don't think that's the case at all. So where are we looking at it?
Military personnel charging round in that forest, and you know, you'd got people saying, "Oh, it was the lighthouse," and that surely that could have been replicated on any day of favourable weather conditions of the year if it was the lighthouse. But like you said, Charles Holt, the guy got to that position and took his men out into the forest and described what he was seeing. It didn't sound anything like a lighthouse. I've met him on 2 occasions, you know, and spoke to him once about it. And I asked him if he thought it could have been, if he any thoughts on it being interdimensional, to be honest. And he said, well, I just don't know. It could have been. But I don't think he thinks, I'm not going to quote the guy because I can't be in his mind, but I don't think he thinks it was anything of our making, let's put it that way.
No, and that's the thing. And look, for all of them, so for John Burroughs, well, it's John Burroughs, yeah, I'm sure it is, and Penniston, they definitely think that they've seen something, 100%. Yeah. And it's the same, look, I think, with angels and the rest of it. And I remember a really interesting story that I heard was about a guy who was quite young. He was riding a motorbike through the Nevada desert. And he said he had an accident, and he thought, I'm dead, because no one's here. I haven't seen a car for miles and miles and miles. And he said he woke up and saw a bright light, and he thought, oh, thank God, like paramedics are here. And he said they helped him out and said, look, don't worry, you're going to be all right, we're here, etc. And he said that he kind of just thought, oh, like I say, thank God, and kind of passed out. And he said he woke up again, and he was still looking at the sky. And he thought, what's happened? I should be in an ambulance, should be in a hospital. And he said as he did, he saw another vehicle approaching him. And he said this vehicle approached him, and he stuck his hand up. And when he did, this vehicle stopped. And they said to him, "What's happened?" He said, "I've had a motorbike accident." And anyway, it turned out that when he'd got back to Vegas, he said, "What happened to the paramedics?" And they were like, "There was no paramedics out here at all." And all of his clothes were ripped up, and there was a bunch of his blood all over the floor, but he didn't have a mark on him. And he went on to win the Nobel Prize for a couple of different things. So, like, part of me thinks, well, is that like, I say divine, but some sort of intervention, because he kind of had something to do. He had a task, and that wasn't what was supposed to happen, and that's why something's intervened. And it's the same with angels. I think, yeah, could that be the case? And again, like I say, look, I'm not religious. I don't go to church. I wouldn't say that I'm a Christian, but I have read the Bible and a bunch of other religious books. And again, that's what it says, really. So what she's saying is kind of what it says in that half of the angels were slain, half of them weren't. And they're still here protecting us. So again, like, do I think that couldn't have happened? No, I don't. I think, yeah, it could have happened. I think we'll always struggle to say, well, it did or it was this. But yeah, 100%, I think it's feasible. Absolutely. And that's what I think is actually really interesting about some of the other things, like with strange sightings. Like, whatever you try and explain it as, or whatever you think you can try and explain it as, something is happening, isn't it? Something
without it. There's some on so many levels though, and I just can't get what the connection is, if there is a connection at all between the cryptids, between the UFOs. You know, you got some people claiming that the cryptids are coming with the UFOs and things like that. I mean, I don't know how they're reaching that conclusion, or is it just because the people are reporting UFOs at the same time that they're reporting seeing strange biped creatures? Is that just is it the paranormal soup, just like the byproduct of everything that was happening at Hunmanby in 1998? We'd got the UFO, we'd got the strange footprints on the car, we'd got the coins dropping from the air, we'd got all the power cutting, the radio plugged in, yet it's still playing. You know, which is an impossibility. No batteries in it. You know, so many elements. Car radios playing with no keys in ignition and nobody turning radios on in compound at the back. All sorts of things happening, and I don't know what the connection is, Mike. Obviously, I don't. But I don't know whether it's one hive mind, one all-encompassing intelligence responsible for it all, or whether it's 1,001 things that are just taking advantage of the situation and the prime conditions for it to take place.
Well, so yeah, and a couple of things you touched on there I always find really interesting. So, for example, the effect that this stuff has on electronics. So, again, like working in what I've worked in. So, when I was working in the Middle East, for example, I was with a couple of guys from Special Forces, and this always comes up in conversation when you're sitting with people for long enough. I always say, at what point do I have the ghost and alien talk? Because you're always going to get to that kind of thing. And I was speaking to one of my friends. Well, he became a friend out there, and he was Special Forces. And I said to him, "What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen?" And he said, "Mate," he said, "we were in Afghanistan, and he said this craft came over us and stopped dead. And he said it appeared from out of nowhere. And he said everything we had just stopped working. And he said we're using military grade equipment, which is made to be completely protected from electromagnetic attacks and the rest of it. And he said it all stopped working. And he said it hovered there." And I said to him, "What did he look like? What did it look like?" And he said, "Mate," he goes, "the only way I can describe it is it was all things at all times." And I said to him, "What do you mean?" He said it was changing shape and it was doing it. And he said it was like I could see different things in it and whatever. And he said it shut off. And I said to him, "How do you feel after?" And he said, "Well, it wasn't the worst thing I'd seen that day. So I kind of just put it down to experience and that was it." And I thought this is like a legit guy who's seriously well trained observer, trained for technology and the rest of it. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "Look, it's just not surprising." He said, "A lot of people have had these experiences," and sure enough, they have. But with the effects on electrics, the guy was telling me a story before about Tesla's theory. So through sending electric wirelessly over great distances, and that was what I think Tesla cracked. So I don't know if you know, but he had what was called the Wardenclyffe Tower, and he got a bunch of light bulbs, and he used JP Morgan's money to build this tower for wireless electricity and for free electricity, which JP Morgan wasn't happy about. So they ended up destroying it. But he took a light bulb and he had an assistant and he shoved the light bulb into the floor and was transmitting electric wirelessly, and said that he cracked this back in the 30s and 40s and could do it. So we know even now that you get these wireless light bulbs that you pull them towards, like similar to a Tesla coil, and it will energize it. And we can only do it over very short distances, very small amount of powers. But it does work. So again, do I think that there's a correlation in this? Yeah, 100%. I think there is. Electromagnetism, electrics, etc. And one of my friends told me this story about a guy who'd lost his wife and had a park that no one was allowed into. And at the time, again, I didn't believe this because we were like a lot younger and we were exchanging stories and whatever. And apparently he built this stone park. I think it might have even been called Stone Park on his own, where he was levitating huge stones on top of each other. And I said, "Mate," I was like, "Are you sure?" And I didn't believe it. I'd say I didn't believe it. And he was like, "Yeah." He said that this guy said that he'd unlocked the power of three that Tesla had as well, and that the ancients had. And that when you see these megaliths that are pieces of stone put together that you can't get a hair through, or a piece of paper, that this is how they were doing it, and they were manipulating stuff. And sure enough, I went home and Googled it, because I didn't have a phone with Google on back then, and he was spot on. He was absolutely spot on. So people can look it up if they want to. Like I say, there's thousands of stones that this guy had levitated. And he said that he will never tell people how he's done it, but he's unlocked the power that Tesla had. And that's how it was done. And then when you look at ancient Egypt, they found all these clay pots with a copper core. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Baghdad battery. So they had electric, didn't they? So all these theories that they were lighting pyramids with fire, well, that wouldn't happen because it would have burnt all the oxygen up and killed them. Then there was the theory that they were reflecting the sun into it, but actually you can only reflect the sun 3 times before you can't do it anymore. So again, that wasn't happening. And we found Baghdad batteries, which are putting out voltage. So
Yeah,
they had electric, didn't they?
yeah,
So I think, yeah, a lot of this is relative to electric. And we know that huge amounts of electric can cause really, really strange phenomena. So again, when I hear about cassette players that are doing this stuff and whatever, am I surprised? No, I'm not really. Just purely from the physics side of it. No, I'm not
yeah.
at all. Take a magnet to your TV screen and it seriously affects it.
Do
So
you, do you, do you think, Mike, that when the phenomena's present and people report the strange feeling, everything's gone quiet, eerily quiet, even in a place like where there's lots of insect life, crickets and things. Do you think that it's the phenomena that's placing its environment around what it wants so it can enter, or do you think something else is happening? I mean, I personally think that it's almost like a bubble of oxygen. If we were under the water that we could breathing, it's almost like it's creating its own environment
yeah.
inside our environment, and that's why we get that feeling, that, as people call it, the Oz factor. And have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think we're a lot more perceptive than people think, really. So again, we know that we're affected by infrasound that we can't hear, but so it's out of our range of hearing, but it definitely affects us. We know that there's weapons now, so for example, 432 Newton meters of light waves affects us really badly. So the government have made weapons that are green lasers. They're called laser dazzlers. I don't know if you've ever seen them. But if they shine them at you, they make you really sick. And the LRAD, so long-range audio device, which again makes you really sick, can make your ears bleed, microwave devices, etc. So the point I'm making is that we can pick up on a lot more than we think. And so, yeah, I have thought about this before. And the reason why is because when the eclipse happened, my dad took us to France. So my dad was always quite proactive on making sure that we had these experiences and building circuits and all that kind of stuff. He took us to northern France for the eclipse, which would have been, what, 96, I think? I can't really remember, but around then. And one thing that I noticed that my dad pointed out is he said, look at what's happened. And a couple of minutes before the eclipse happened, everything changed. Everything changed. So when I think about birds, and I've never been into killing animals, I just think, like, what right have we got really to kill animals? I think it's quite strange people would want to kill animals. But you look at birds. So, for example, the black box was developed from a woodpecker's head, because a woodpecker it basically insulates its brain from being affected by the way it smashes its beak against a tree. So that turned out to be really good technology for black boxes in planes. It's the same with wingtips. So if you look at winglets, they were developed from birds. So they were looking at birds and how they're staying in the air. And an engineering connection showed
everything in nature. We're replicating everything in nature and, well, using it in our technology, and it's
exactly. And it's far more sophisticated.
It's already been invented.
That's the thing, yeah. So birds have got compasses in. Birds have got a perception of magnetic north and what way they're going. That's how they migrate. So, yeah, so I think there's a lot we do pick up on with this, and other animals. So like you say, when crickets go silent, I think because, definitely, I think there would be an effect on that. And I think there's so much that we don't understand, which is why when people say, well, it can't be this, it can't be that, I think, no, that's not what you can say. Like, you can't say, no, it's not this, or no, it's not that. But then there is a couple of questions that I have to consider, and I have to kind of think about. So, for example, Roswell. I think, like, if you're an alien race and you're super intelligent and you've got the technology to come here, surely you'd have the technology not to crash. So
exactly. Yeah, I've thought that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, is it a Trojan horse? Is it a modern day Trojan horse, or is it that these things are so again we smash stuff into planets. So again, a fact that we can't deny, which Werner von Braun spoke about a lot, was when we smashed the probe into the moon, and apparently it rung like a bell. So they smash probes into the moon and they look at the displacement of dust and they see what happens, and nobody expected it to, but it rung like a bell. And then when they did it again with even more of an impact, it rang for even longer. So again, it's just a fact. This is what's out there from the research.
Could Roswell have been an alien attempt at seeing how we would react to a crashed flying saucer or crashed spaceship? I don't know what word you want to use for them, but there again, if they're that far advanced, they'll have worked out how we would react and how we would think, wouldn't they?
Yeah, so again, this is the interesting thing that's going to come to as well about unanswered questions. So something that you've got far more experience in than me is cattle mutilations. So again, if an alien race is so far advanced that they've got
Right.
all this ability, yeah, why are they taking cells from sheep? Or why are they not taking the whole sheep and doing an experiment and then cloning it? So again, we're not that far away from cloning animals. In fact, we have cloned sheep.
Yeah.
So
Why would you remove ears and eyes from these animals? Why wouldn't you go into upper islands of Scotland or somewhere in South America where nobody's ever going to see these things? Why would I mean from my own experience on coast? Why would you do it where people are going to see and at least try and investigate it? Well, we're not going to get an answer to it. I mean, I walked them fields from at 4:30 in the morning for the best part of at least a year, but it ran over, and not every day, but I was doing 3 or 4 days a week, and I never caught anybody doing it. I never caught man or anything other doing it. Do you know what I mean? There are lots of people coming up with suggestions of what it were. Most of it were, it's the work of men, humans doing it. But it definitely weren't.
oh,
They
yeah,
were
I don't believe it. When you've got objects that are clawed out by what looks like a laser, then again, I can't see it. The government wouldn't want that technology out there being in the open. And again, so one of the things that Linda Moulton Howe spoke about was a piece of cattle, a cow, whatever it was in the middle of an area where there was no footprints going to it. So it had clearly been dropped from the air. So
we do.
again,
We do have to, and some researchers will want to believe everything's ET, regardless of whether it is or it isn't. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to name names, but I was shown some pictures of spiral wounds on seals years and years ago that they were work of our ET friends. Well, I got friends in Bridlington Harbour, and I showed them photographs, and they said they're the work of propellers. Do you know? And he said it's not ET, and I was quite happy to believe that the guys in the harbour, not because I didn't want to believe this guy who thought it were ET, but it was more probable. I mean, this just at Christmas, I think it was Christmas Eve, 10 juvenile sperm whales were washed up about 12 miles down the coast from me. They weren't washed up, they beached. So they were still alive, and they died. They couldn't get them back out to sea, and they died. They're not they shouldn't be in our waters. They're supposed to be in deep water. So we don't know. For me, the mystery is why they were there. But I did notice that I think it was Linda Moulton Howe that she'd put on that body parts had been removed, lower jaw and other parts from these sperm whales. No explanation why. So the reader were led to believe that this had happened out at sea, and they were dead. They weren't. There were no body parts removed from these whales until they actually got beached, and then you'd got macabre trophy hunters taking things from them. That was the truth of that. So not everything's UFO related. I'm not knocking Linda for that, by the way. I mean, I think it was probably information that she'd been given, but I did correct that information. So, yeah. But I think a lot of people are quick to jump onto alien hypothesis just because that's their thing. We know it's my thing. We know I'm interested in this, but not everything that's seen up there, and not everything that we perceive as alien is.
No, and I think that's why I was so interested in the work that you're doing, because for me, the question is what is the threshold? So, for example, when you start looking into UFO cases, so for me, kind of a few criteria have to be met. So, firstly, uncharacteristic movements or behaviour. So, things like we said, like 90-degree right turns or left turns or whatever. Again, that's not something you can magic out of thin air. So, yeah, direction change is a big thing. And even Buzz Aldrin said exactly the same thing. So that they thought that they were seeing potentially a part of their rocket, and they said it changed direction. Well, in space, that doesn't happen. No. So if you get one of those little spring-loaded cars, and I talk about this quite a lot, if you get one of those spring-loaded cars that you pull it back and push it, and it pushes itself along the floor, what's stopping it is friction and resistance, really. In space, that wouldn't happen. In space, it would go forever. You pull it back, and it would go forever. There's nothing to stop it. So to change that direction, it's having a force put on it, isn't it?
Well, the strange, Gary, that's why I sort of rattle on about these lights so much that are seen over the coast, Mike, because they're not flying from anywhere. They're not projectiles like as in a flare from a boat or dropped from an aircraft. These things literally just come on, then another one, then another, sometimes 5, switch off, and then in a blink, they're 10 miles down coast doing the same thing. unless it's a different group of the lights. But they're not dropping, and you're seeing smoke like you would with a flare that, traveling with wind. There's no rhyme or reason. That's why that photograph that I spoke about earlier that Brian took is so. I think it's quite an important photograph, because by taking it with a 30-second exposure, it rules out, because we would have seen motion blur in the picture.
Yeah, you would have seen the move. Yeah, absolutely.
Stars are crisp and clear. Everything's sharp. He's got a brilliant photograph, and these lights are just there. So, it rules out the afterburners. You get every kind of suggestion. Meteors, which we know it wouldn't be. I mean, I don't know if anybody thinks that a meteor is just going to switch on in sky and stay there. Afterburners, meteors, flares, Chinese lanterns. Every explanation's been offered up for these lights, but you're seeing them just off the coast, and you're seeing them up to 10 and 12 miles out. They've got me intrigued. They really have.
Well, again, it has to be something, doesn't it? And when people say it's a meteor, like that to me just seems mad. Because, for example, if we look at the dash cam footage of a meteor, we know what it's like. So we know meteor as well. We see what happens. Quite often there's a sonic boom and the rest of it. So it's like, when people come up with these theories, it's like what you're saying is actually far more less feasible than
far more
a lot
ridiculous than what we're suggesting. We're not saying what it is, but we're saying it is a true unknown. If anything needs studying, in what I've been looking into, it's these lights. Because I don't know whether anybody is going to sort of take them any more serious than I'm going to take them. But they're worthy of serious study, and I don't know anybody that's doing it. I know that is it Hesselden in Norway. They were studying similar lights. The light form phenomena in Norway, and I think we're looking at something similar. I mean, Philip's of the opinion that they're Earth lights. And I'm not going to argue with Philip. I mean, he's a great guy. I get on great with him. But his friend, who was in charge of the project over there, believes that there's some intelligence, some awareness to him. And I'm with him on that. That's what I think's happening here. When I stood on that cliff top 2019 with a guy called Lee Hayward, and Lee is a switched on guy, and he even knew names at boats that were out on horizon and everything. As you've gathered with me with technology, I'm pretty useless, but he'd got everything. He knew what were flying. He knew what military aircraft were up there. And we're setting cameras up, looking out to sea. And I just turned round, and inland, but in the field with us, not on the horizon, there's 3 of these lights set up in like a snooker ball formation. The great halo around them. And they're huge. We're looking at them. And Lee's blown away, because he didn't really. I think he thought. I don't know what he thought. He weren't really sold on idea. He wanted to come and see whether he could see anything, and that what best I've ever seen them, to be honest. And as I'm getting the camera around to film them, they're just imploding. They've gone. And Lee were right. I mean, he did me a little write up for it, and they were lighting the ground up below them. Quite incredible. God knows what they are. No idea.
So again, it doesn't. So this is the other thing I talk about. And look, being quite lucky that, like, I'm a qualified pilot, I have never ever flown anywhere without looking at what's called a NOTAM. So it's a notice to airmen. Yeah. And whether you're flying model aircraft or you're launching a weather balloon or whatever, you have to put a NOTAM out. It's on there, 100%. So things don't just appear. They don't just. Someone doesn't just think, "Oh, I'll put these out." Yeah, it does happen. So if I want to put anything static in the sky, whatever that is, then I have to tell someone. And if I don't, then I'm liable to go into prison. So again, I just don't think that these are just random people with drones or whatever. There has to be something more to it. Or military. Because military just put on a massive exclusion zone, and that's it. And you can't go near it. And they tell you can't go near it. And again, you risk your license and prison if you do. So, yeah, again, I don't... And understanding airspace as well. So, for example, where I fly, it's from North London. It's one of the busiest airspace corridors in the world. And you have to get what's called a max penetration. So if I fly anywhere near, for example, Brize Norton or whatever, before I even get close to Brize Norton, I have to call them up and say, basically, can I get a transit through your airspace? So it's called a max penetration. And they'll tell you where to go to keep you away. And a lot of the time, they're not overly busy. So they'll say, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Go through our stub. But their stub is miles and miles out. So we're not going to see anything sensitive, but even to get close to anything they're doing you have to talk to them. You have to let them know what you're doing. So it's not just a random object. And again, knowing things like, so for example, people say like there's something in the air, it's been there for 2 hours. There's very few drones that we've got that will stay static in the air for 2 hours. You know, I've got a small drone. They've only been around for a few years, and that will do 25 minutes, and you can tell that's a drone a mile off. You know,
Yeah.
it's just not something that these are. So people try and look for all these explanations rather than saying what I think is true, which is we don't know. Then rather than you trying to make your square peg fit a round hole, it's like, why not be honest about it and saying this is something strange?
I agree, Mike. Before we wrap this up, because I don't know what time you've got,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I was gonna say,
what are your views on the drones that brought the airports to a standstill? And that were 2019, I think, weren't it? Early 2019 or late 2018?
yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah. So, yeah,
I'm
the
not.
one's at Gatwick, the Gatwick drone.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that was something I looked into quite a lot at the time. And what was quite interesting was again at DEF CON hacking conference, you can watch talks where people talk about hacking drones. So so the first drone that I built was called a DJI 450, and that had what's called a NASA controller on it. So that was a NASA flight controller. But flying these things was a handful. I crashed loads of them all the time. Like crashing was like a daily occurrence. So very quickly, people started coming out and hacking the technology. And again, you can see it. It's a DEF CON talk. I think it's called drone hacking or something. And a guy uses a computer to hack drones and take control of them. But the reason I'm saying this is because we know how to overtake them, so we know how to defend from them. And if you had a look what happened at Gatwick, they did actually have the kit to stop it, but they didn't. And the reason was because I personally think that was another nation state. So I think that was Russia or someone like that. And they were probing our defences to see what drone defence we had. And Raytheon, who make that technology, really didn't want to out our capability in crashing drones, really. So we know that we can do it, but yeah, that's what I think that was. And that's why I think, unfortunately, it went on for so long. But I think they wanted to see how we'd react to it, how long it would take, and what we do about it, really.
but they were all. I'm not disagreeing with you because you've got much more knowledge than me on that. But I mean, they were all the top newspapers with cameras trying to film these things. Yet there was nothing filmed. I mean, I found that interesting. There were no pictures of them, really, were they?
No, well, so this is the interesting thing. So again, like perception of things. So when I fly my drone, and some of my drones have been quite big, as soon as it gets to a couple of 100 feet away, you can't see it. And
Right.
even then, try and hone in on it with a camera, and it's almost impossible. So you can hear it before you can
Yeah.
see it, but they're very, very difficult to see. And again, flight times. So when I spoke to people in the community and they were saying what they thought happened, they thought that there was multiple operators, and because some of them have got a 10-mile range, and obviously nation states would have a much larger range,
Yeah.
then they could have been a few miles away, but they wouldn't have long. Because again of the restrictions of electric and electronics and battery life and the rest of it, you end up with the exponential issue where if you want to fly for longer, you need a bigger battery. If you need a bigger battery, you've got more weight, you need a bigger battery. If you need a big battery, you've got more weight, you need a bigger battery. And before you know it, your drone's the size of a car and it'll only fly for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I personally think they would go in there, kind of making themselves aware, flying off. Someone else was launching one from somewhere else, giving them the runaround, and I'm not surprised they didn't get pictures of it, really. But again, when you look at the reports, so if you look at, I think I can't remember what airport it was now, but the UFO that punched a hole in a cloud,
Yeah.
what was it?
That,
It was in Utah or somewhere. That was totally different. Then that was clearly seriously unexplained. A lot of credible witnesses saw it, pictures of it, hole shaped, well, obviously a circular shaped hole in the clouds. I don't think that's what we were looking at Gatwick, if I'm honest.
No.
And again,
No.
like we have to look at exotic technology and the way that nation states probe us and the rest of it, and just trying to be honest about how it looks. And to me, that's how it looked. But nonetheless, what you're seeing and some of that stuff isn't that either. It's not. So it's very easy to say, oh, it's Russia, it's this and that. But again, no, I don't think it is. I don't think a lot of it is. And with cattle mutilations, again, it's easy to say, oh no, it's not this, it's humans. But again, I just don't think that that's particularly likely either. So
Humans were being blamed in all instances. I mean, the foxes that I were finding, the badgers, the roe deer, that were the most perplexing because they're probably the fastest thing we've got in United Kingdom. And no bite marks on them from dogs, no bullet wounds, but we've got ears removed and eyes removed. And they've caught the fastest thing that we've got running well, potentially a greyhound might be faster. I don't know, but what I'm saying is they've caught something very fast with humans. It's not happening, you know. But
Yeah.
it's so easy just to make a sweeping statement and go, "Oh, it's people." Well, you're on about, oh, you think it's some kind of strange, I don't know, creature or something of an unexplained phenomena that's doing it. You must be nuts. But they don't offer an explanation apart from it's people. It's a difficult one. We're in a no-win situation with it at the moment because it's fully loaded to believe the skeptic, I'm afraid, or and it's not bad being skeptical either. Well, like we've said before, Mike, not everything that is reported, not everything I say, I don't get it right all the time. So, somebody might come up with a perfectly plausible explanation for one of the things I've spoken about. I'm not going to fall out with them. I'd openly speak about it on air and say I were wrong, and I don't think that's such a bad thing.
No, of course not. And I understand it. And this is why I was quite interested to see, like, at what kind of point you think, okay, well, this is unexplained. So like we say, like, so for example, if we had a checklist of, right, okay, well, uncharacteristical movement, so like we say, sharp turn, speed, something static, then kind of at what point do you start saying, right, okay, well, this is actually something. So one of the things,
in the environment, changes in the way it makes us feel. Even if it's just making your skin feel prickly, you're getting some kind of strange reaction to it. You don't get that feeling when an aircraft passes over, do you? Do you know what I mean? And
no,
I don't know, a feeling of extreme fear that comes from nowhere. Is that all part of the infrasound? I don't, and the other elements that are at play. I suppose a checklist of these things. I mean, people must have done them, but it's maybe we need to do another.
yeah, well, that's what I find really interesting. And to wrap this up, one of the arguments that I remembered seeing at an airfield once was between a couple of guys that were pilots, and again, we're talking about UFOs and the rest of it. Because again, a lot of pilots have had UFO experiences. Like I told you that I have, and I'm not saying that that's definitely anything alien, but I told you about the UFO experience I had with a ship. So where I looked out on the horizon and I was absolutely sure that this object was in the air, and it was a ship that was out at sea. But you can't tell, and people must think, "Oh, you're stupid. You can't tell the difference between the air or the sky and water." You can't. It's as simple as that. When you're looking, you can't tell the difference.
Especially as there's a bit of mist out on the horizon as well. As a pilot, you'll know better than me, but I know from looking from the cliffs. And if you've got a bit of mist out on the horizon and you've got a boat beyond the mist and you can see the light, you can perceive it as though it's in the air, but it isn't, because it might be 4 miles in front if you've got a 20-odd mile view to horizon. It's just perception. And some people won't think past that, and that's in the sky. And I think some people probably know it's on horizon, but want it to be in the sky that much that because you could pass these things off if you wanted on film sometimes as well. You could cheat and say, look, this, and actually knowing it's not. There's 3 or 4 miles of sea mist in front of that just about looks the same colour as sea and sky, and the mist looks like the horizon, and it's easy, you know what I mean?
That's the thing. So this argument I saw was it's again talking about UFOs, what had anyone seen, and the rest of it. And this pilot said, totally credible story. So he was an ex-Australian Air Force pilot that was now over here, done thousands of hours with BA. It's a really, really experienced pilot. And he said, I've seen 3 or 4 UFOs in my time. And he said one of them came across left to right, said went up and down, and so basically put on a display for us. And he said, I felt like it knew that we were watching, and really rubbed its capability in our nose. And I thought it was quite interesting.
I obviously spoke about it openly to you, but did he speak about it officially?
No one. And this is the thing, no one wants to report it. And what I'm going to tell you is partly why. And this guy was sitting at the table behind us, and it is quite a small community, like aviation, so everyone talks to everyone and whatever. And this guy turned around and went, "Oh, what, you seen a flying dustbin lid?" Because there's a really famous case of a guy that faked UFOs with a dustbin lid. I can't remember his name now from memory. I think it was in like the 50s. And it was proven that he faked it. And I just remember this pilot kicking off, and he was like, "How dare you?" He's like, "I'm a pilot with 30,000 hours, and because one idiot somewhere has faked it with a dustbin lid, he thinks that you also what I've seen, that I don't know the difference between a flying dustbin lid and something that's got capability." And I thought, just what a silly comment to say to somebody who's so experienced.
That's the closed-minded attitude that you get, though, because that guy's probably never seen anything, and and that's not a criticism of him, but obviously he's not going to be swayed by anybody's suggestion that there's anything else out there, is he? And probably after he's made that kind of stance, if he did see something, he wouldn't say out anyway, because he'd be backing down, wouldn't he?
No, it's the thing, and like they say, look, seeing is believing, really, isn't it? But I do find it fascinating. I find the work that you're doing fascinating, definitely. And like I say, look, part of me thinks, will we ever know? Should we ever know? But look, I'm really thankful, and I listen to a lot of stuff, and I listen to some people, like you say, that are hell bent that this is this, and trying to make that square peg fit that round hole, like we say. And I'm just glad that there's people out there looking at it sensibly, really, and objectively, and that are open-minded and open to change as well. And like you say, look, if something was proved in front of you, then yeah, you'd be open to it.
We can't bury your head in sand if somebody's going to step forward and say, look, this is what you saw, and here's how I can prove it. Then you've just got to hold your hand up, haven't you? You know, it's pointless arguing against actual proof of that it's a ground-based, it's a, I don't know, man-made phenomena that you're looking at. And, you know, somebody might step forward with these lights and turn around and prove that it's something military. I fail to believe that because of the amount of time that they've been seen. I mean, it's going back decades and decades. It's going back at least 80 years in archives that I've looked at, you know, so it's got to be pretty good. Like, you know, when the guys at Crab Rocks, who were all in the crab pots in the little cobble fishing boat called the Imperialist, said that three of them instinctively ducked because they saw the light in the water and looked up, and it was just above their heads, and it was a milky coloured sphere of light, size of in Flamborough terminology, a ball, a football, size of a football that just literally just shot off.
Yeah, and again, that's quite common.
1963, you know.
Yeah, when we just didn't have the technology, whatever we think about the military and how far ahead they are. But so what I always say, that I said to wrap this up, is that when I speak to my mates about it and they say, what do you think? And I say, look, I don't know. I've never seen what I would say is Little Green Men. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that if you look at Lonnie Zamora, Betty and Barney Hill, any of these cases, even Travis Walton, like you say, only one of them needs to be true. That's all it takes, isn't it? And even if what you're looking at with cutting stations, for example, we don't know. 50% of them might be easily explained. 99% of them might be easily explained. But if 1% of them aren't, that's, like I say, that's all it takes, isn't it?
Yep.
So,
it's been great talking, Mike. I've enjoyed it. In fact, it's gone quite quick, that, hasn't it?
Yeah, likewise. It's fascinating stuff, and we haven't even touched on half it as well with crypto and the rest of it. So, yeah, I'll see it again. But look, thanks for your time, and like I said, thanks for the work you're doing as well. I find it fascinating.
You're welcome.
Yeah, cool. We'll keep in touch.